All right, today we're going to be checking out Patrick Bet-David on impact theory, hosted by, I think it's Tommy Ballou. So they're talking about the possible reverse market crash. Um, so we're going to dive into what that looks like. But with the economy in the state that it's currently in under the Biden administration, and basically it's Bidenomics as they explain it, which is just the country is in like pre-crash bubble state right now, worse than the 2008 housing market crash because it's ballooning up very fast and things are basically higher and more expensive and interest rates are higher than they have been in a long time. Things are more expensive technically than they've ever been in the history of this country. On top of that, you also have the dollar being devalued simultaneously, which is causing things to be more expensive, but your purchasing power is decreasing. So they're going to get into that. They're going to talk about what that might look like. I don't know how old some of you are, but if you're old enough to remember the dot-com boom and that whole bust in the late 90s going into the early 2000s with the turn of the new millennium, um, and the big stock market crash that had happened then, and then also in 2008 with the housing market crash, when I mean, essentially millions and millions of people across the country, but also countless millions across the world, had actually lost their homes. Many of them had multiple homes. Um, not the way that they should have done it. Getting these homes when they really couldn't afford them on paper, but the banks were trying to get as many loans as they could to make a profit. And it was this big scheme, and everybody was kind of in on it. The ratings agencies, everybody involved in the financial industry, the banks, the mortgage lenders, everybody, was just kind of taking, and not really caring what the consequences would be of this. But it was catastrophic. And from 2008, but really 2009 was when the full effects came in. Up until like I'd say it bottomed out at 2012 and then started to slowly come back up at the end of Obama's first term. I think it was. He was president he won the election in 2008. So I think, essentially January 2009, he took office and was president, you know, for those 4 years, 9, 10, 11, 12. And basically going into his second term is when the economy just started to pull out of like basically a depression. I mean, they didn't label it a depression, and they still to this day, I don't think have. They still called it a recession, but that's not what a recession is. Technically, I think a recession is 6 consecutive months of economic downturn. We'll classify it as a recession, and then anything past that is a depression. This went on for many years. It took 4 years for it to bottom out, and then it took another 4 years for it to come up to a point that was, you know, we would basically call like an equilibrium, where things started to level out and people started to really reinvest again and have like money and stability. So that period you could essentially say was an 8-year period. That event, that crash, had impacted this country, and there were millions of people without jobs for a long time. There were industries that closed down, um, many others, but one of the biggest financial institutions that was over 100 years old, Lehman Brothers, had shut its doors after, they were one of the first ones, I think, to actually go down. But over 100 years old, they were basically a major financial institution. They were, the top tier of the financial industry, and everybody recognized them as that. And they collapsed because they had a lot of these loans, these toxic loans. on their books. And same thing happened to Bear Stearns. Bear Stearns was another gigantic corporation that was involved in this whole, situation, and they fell too, and people swore that that was not going to happen. So, well, actually, there's a great movie on the 2008 housing market crash. Excellent, one of the best movies I've ever seen, especially that talks about like finances and things that are very boring for most people. Uh, it makes it, they made it in a way where it was very enjoyable, very entertaining. If you ever have a chance to see this movie, it's called The Big Short. Excellent movie. It's a huge cast. Steve Carell, Christian Bale, Ryan Gosling, like a lot of major actors are in it, but it was really well done. It made a subject that would be boring to most people who don't like finances or money or math or things like that, and turned it into a really entertaining movie, but in a way that was also educational, which you really don't see, and funny. And there was a lot of humor in it. You don't really see that today, but it was one of the best movies I think I've ever seen. And it really talks about that subject and explains from certain people's point of views what that looked like. But we've been in a decent economy for a long time now. Trump's first term from 2000, he won in 16, but technically 17, all through the COVID era. So, yeah, we had a downturn during the COVID era, which, was, I think, March, the first week of March, when they shut everything down, the economy, the stock market tanked. But that was really just on paper because there was no real reason for that to happen other than the government said we're shutting everything down. So yeah, if you stop everybody from going to work and you stop everyone from doing their job, it's like turning a machine off. All the cogs, all the wheels and bells and whistles that are operating in that machine, if you shut it off, it stops working. Whatever it's producing doesn't get produced, right? But as soon as they turn that back on, the economy went running like crazy because now they're trying to catch up to all of the manufacturing and production and everything that was not going on for so many months. And for the businesses that actually closed, they were scrambling to fulfill back orders and stuff. So the demand was there. It's not like the demand wasn't there. The way the economy works is it's really very simple. It's supply versus demand. It's how many people want a service or a product, and how many of those services or products are there to fill that demand. If there's more supply than demand, or more than demand than supply, the situation is basically out of whack, and you're going to have an impact on the economy either way. What you want is an equilibrium where there's basically the same amount of supply as demand and vice versa. And that's really what an ideal economy looks like. But yeah, this period of time from Trump's first era in office was a great economy. I mean, people remember even like in 2019 as it being one of the greatest years economically in a long time. We're talking 15, 20 years. I have experience in the real estate industry, and I've, personally spoken with people who told me they bought their home in 2003, 4, 5, whatever, right around that period of the housing market crash, before it crashed, when everything was blowing up and everybody was buying like crazy, and the economy seemed really good. People bought their home at the peak market, right? So they're buying a home that's actually the true valuation is, let's say, $500,000. At that time, they probably paid six, seven, $800,000 for that home that's really only worth 500,000. Now, a home real estate doesn't really inflate that much. It's not supposed to go up that rapidly. You usually have a 3 to 5% increase in value, sometimes 10, depending on how good the market is and how well everything's growing. But you typically have, you know, grow and appreciate at a very, very slow rate. And that's because real estate is stable, right? It's not going anywhere. Typically, unless something happens, it's not going anywhere. It's stable. So it just naturally appreciates in value over time as the economy gets better. There's more, whatever, just things that help stimulate the economy. And naturally with money printing and things like that, slowly but surely prices go up and assets appreciate, right? And real estate is one of the top assets in any industry. But yeah, so there, you know, was a period of just positive economy, right? People were doing well, they were making more money, people had jobs again, people were stepping away from working multiple jobs and shifting to working just one primary job, maybe having a little something on the side, but predominantly, that happened. And also there were a lot of entrepreneurs who started businesses during that era because they saw the opportunity on the market and they were fulfilling that demand, right? Supply and demand. But the same thing during the whole COVID era. That was like an artificial decrease in the economy with, forcing everybody to close their businesses. So it tanked the stock market for a short period of time, but that started coming back up. Naturally, as things opened, people were trying to scramble to fulfill the demand with new supply, right? But one of the biggest, most fatal mistakes that the government made, and this goes for Trump's administration too. I get why he did this because it seemed like the only way out at that time, and he was probably trying to secure himself his reelection, which was coming up shortly, before in November of 2020. People were told you can't go to work, you can't go out, you can't do all this stuff, and it was under his regime, technically his administration, that all this stuff went on. So there were a lot of people who were probably looking at him and his administration as, oh, maybe this was a mistake, putting him in office because look what happened under pressure. He destroyed the economy, allegedly, or just took bad advice from advisors around him, listened to them, and, made that mistake. So he decided to do that stimulus package where he printed a ton of money, to quote unquote stimulate the economy, which really was not like a lot of money. It's not like it was enough to, take people who were sitting home for months on end, not making any money, and replace their income, if not more. It wasn't even close to that. It was just enough to basically put food on the table for a short period of time. But, he did it and his administration did it, and the people took the bait. A lot of people took that money and instead of doing smart things with it, they blew it on shopping, they bought themselves luxury items, you know, and made all kinds of bad decisions. Well, what happens is that money, it just goes back to the top, right? The rich people. You're just taking that money and you're continuing to make people who are already rich richer. Look at some of the top billionaires during that time: Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos. A lot of these people got way richer, like $100 billion richer during that COVID era because all the money from the stimulus and other money was pouring into their companies, right? Because people were spending that money frivolously. If everybody took that money and whatever other money they were able to secure during the time, during, when the market was good in certain ways, like in real estate, if they took that money and reinvested it into things, they might have helped themselves during this time that's now a down economy. But a lot of people made bad decisions with their money. So, but real estate went up. Real estate was one of the few things that went up. Houses were skyrocketing to all-time highs where people were paying way over market value for a home. And what was worse was right around the corner was the complete opposite economy, right? Not only did home prices start to come down, which they still are, interest rates started going up because they raised them. The government raised the interest rates, right? Um, so happened, and going back to that situation where I've spoken with many people who, bought during the 2003, 4, 5 years when the homes were at all-time highs. When I spoke to them in 2020, 2021, 2022, many of them had told me who happened to be caught up in that situation, they had bought their home during 2003, 4, 5, and it wasn't until 2020, 21, 22 when houses were skyrocketing in price artificially that they were finally able to exit their home. They were finally able to sell their home for the same amount or a little bit more from what they bought it 15 plus years earlier. It took them 15 years to get out of a bad deal, right? And this happened with many people that I spoke to, many, and like a lot more than should have. You may maybe an anomaly, maybe one or two. You think, oh well, that just you got caught up in that time. I spoke to many people who had this situation, and they saw this as a golden opportunity to get out of that home that they were stuck in for 15 years. At that moment in 2020, 2021, whatever, they saw an opportunity. They said, this is my last chance because it took 15 years for the economy to get back to the point where my home is actually worth what I paid for it because it wasn't really worth that. But they thought it was at that time because the economy was inflated. It was a bubble. So, you know, people finally, after 15 years or so, exited their homes and new people came in and bought them at that price. And now those people are going to be stuck in those homes for 15 years or maybe even more, right? Because this is what happens when you buy things that are valued way higher than they're actually worth. Now, if you buy an asset and you buy it to hold it for a very long time, more than 10 years, like 20, 30, 40 years, right? And ideally, that's what people used to do. That's why they have 30-year mortgages because most people would, at least at that time, mortgages were expensive and people would, buy their home and that would be the home that they raised their children, their family grew up in, and they would live there for 30 years. And then finally, when they were old and retired, they'd either, keep the home until they died or sell it or pass it on to their children and go, live in a retirement home or something. People aren't really doing that today. I think the average people stay in their home is somewhere between 7 and 8 years, I think. I could be wrong, but I think that's around what it is. It didn't used to be that way. So people made bad decisions back then, and they continue to make them today. It's just the way it is. Because you have to really do your research, especially when it comes to finances and money. There's always going to be people in the market that are trying to manipulate it or play it in a certain way that it benefits them so that they can get richer. And especially if you have power and control or you're corrupt, it's tempting to not manipulate the industry, the markets, whatever, to have a personal gain for yourself. So you got to do your research. But that was a long-winded intro. We're going to look into this video. We may not watch the whole thing, but it looks like it's going to be a good video. I like Patrick and I like Tommy too. They're both very intelligent people. So let's see what they have to say and we'll make some comments along the way.
What's different between today and 2008 market crash? 2008 market crash was about no income, no assets, NINA loans. Banks were giving them money left and right. Hey, stated income. You're trying to qualify for a $720,000 loan. How much money did you make last year, Tom? Honestly, you're $48,000. You're not going to get qualified for this, Tom. I'm going to ask this question one more time. How much money did you make last year? I told you $48,000. Do you want to get qualified for this or not? Yeah. Okay, one more time. How much money did you make last year? 62? That's what it was. No income, no assets in 2008, right?
Right?
2007.
A lot of people were
And
doing that.
I remember the month when I knew it's over because the one guy in LA who was making 400 grand a month had an office in Topanga Valley, in Topanga or Canoga, 30,000 square feet of office space. November of 2007, he shuts it down.
Ooh.
Mm.
And this is right after you're seeing WAMU, Countrywide, all these other companies that are doing what they're doing. Very problematic when that took place. So then you saw cities like Riverside Community, Riverside County, 65% houses foreclosure.
Oh,
Then you had
God.
loan modification. Then you have people that were buying 5, 6 homes paying the negative amortization payment, which means if you got a loan, this was a program that came here from Australia. It's what the story you always hear about that this program was in Australia. We brought it in America. It was meant to only be for people who are affluent. Okay. You got a $20 million loan on a house. You got $40 million on a bank account. I'll give you $20 million. No problem. You got 4 payments to make. You got your 15-year loan, which is going to be the biggest loan. You got your 30-year fix, which is going to be reasonable, but it's not a 15-year loan. Then you have your interest only, that you're literally only paying interest, and the loan stays the same amount. Or you got your negative amortization payment, which means the loan gets bigger every month that you pay it because it's negative amortization. Every month the loan gets bigger. Okay. So, for example, for the average person in America, it would have been something like this. It would have been NAGAM payment was $1,200 a month. Interest only was $1,800 a month. 30-year fix was $3,100 a month, and 15-year was $4,500 a month. Okay, so people are like, dude, buy another house and another house and another. So now I got 5 houses that I'm paying $1,200 on. Well, I can afford to do that, except that was only for 2 or 3 or 5 years. And then all of a sudden, your 1,200 payment goes to $4,200 times 5 houses. How do you pay 20,000?
Yeah, so that's called an adjustable rate mortgage. So basically what that is they'll give you what's called a teaser rate, where they get, let's say it's like, but you pay 0% for the first, 6 months. And you look and say, oh, well, I don't pay any interest. Great. I'm going to do that. Lock me in. And a lot of people did this without even reading the loan agreements, right? But then it'll say, once your teaser rate expires in 6 months, your rate is going to go up to 27% interest or whatever the number is. It wasn't really that high, but um, it might go up to 10%, right? And the average at the time could have been 2.5 or 3%. You're going to pay 10%. It's like, why am I paying 10%? Well, we have to make up for the 6 months you were paying zero. So we build that into the deal. And really, it's just a way to like screw people, to make them think they're getting something that they can't afford, when in actuality, they're just going to raise this up on you, collect as much money as they can from you. And then when you default, you go into foreclosure, they kick you out, they keep all that money, including what you invested into with the down payment and whatever other money you put into the deal. And then they go and find a new quote unquote sucker to buy into that, another deal like that. And this is something that was a huge catalyst in the housing market crash. One of them was like CDOs, collateralized debt obligations, and other things like that, synthetic CDOs, whatever. But a big thing was adjustable rate mortgages, and it was really because people who could not afford a home, because it was getting more and more expensive for people to afford a home in America. I think typically it would cost you like a year's salary to buy a home in America, and now it's somewhere around, I want to say, if the average person makes $55,000 a year, it could be anywhere from 7 to 10 years salary to buy a home now. That's like a normal average home, not anything super expensive, but not anything run down that needs a lot of work. But back then, homes were maybe a year's salary, maybe 2 years salary, which was very reasonable. The interest rates were a lot higher back then, but it was good because it was a way to keep people who couldn't actually afford that thing from buying it. So a lot of people would rent, and now that's what's happening again today. A lot of people are renting again for the first time in a long time. It's cheaper to rent than it is to buy because the economy is all backwards, it's all upside down, right? But this was a big problem with the 2008 housing market crash. This was a huge catalyst, was the adjustable rate mortgage. And people should not have been allowed to buy something they couldn't afford, but they just had their eye on the prize. They wanted the home. They didn't care what it cost them. So they decided to just do it, right? The problem with that is, let's say you're 30 and you saved up from the time you were 25 to 30. You saved up $50,000 to put, 10% down or 20% down on a home, whether it's 250,000 or $500 on a home, whatever. And you put that down payment down that took you 5 years to save up, and then you make 6 months to a year's worth of payments into that home on the mortgage, including interest. When you default, you go into foreclosure. Not only do you ruin your credit, you lose all that money that you invested into that asset or that property. Typically, a residential home that you live in is not an asset. I know people think it is, but it's not. It's a liability. But you lose all that money and you lose time because it took you 5 or 6 years to get to that point, right? Now you have to start all over again. You have no asset to sell to take that money out and put it into a new deal. You sell your home, you go buy a new home with the proceeds, right? That's typically what happens. Since you don't have that, you now lose everything and you lose the time that it took you to get there. You have to start from scratch again. This happened to a ton of people during that time. They lost everything. They got foreclosed on. Many people went homeless. Many people were living in their cars for a long time. You know, millions of people were homeless, millions. And you know, people just they didn't care. They didn't care that they couldn't afford it. Instead of just living within their means, which is what most people should do. And most people don't do that. Most people, they live way outside their means, but all that ever does is keep you stuck in being part of the slave class, you know? And it takes you your whole life to like, keep paying, like you're basically just working to give somebody else your money rather than doing what you want with it. But people, especially in America, where we've become very spoiled as a nation, in that we want all the shiny objects. We want everything. We want to make tons of money. We want to blow it on all kinds of dumb stuff that really doesn't mean anything, rather than, living within your means. If you can afford a $250,000 home today, that's not that great. And it might take you 5 to 10 years to fix it up into your dream home. During that time, your children get to grow up in it. They get to, have experiences. You get to put work into it and see your work come to fruition and be a part of their journey where they remember when dad remodeled the bathroom and what it looked like before and what it looks like now and all these other things. You know, there's something to say about that that's like really pastime in America. People actually putting their time and energy into where they live and making a house a home for their children to grow up in. There's something that, we need to sort of bring that back, but people don't live within in their means. So they go out and they blow their money and they over leverage themselves and then they end up in bad situations like this. The real big issue is that you would think people would have learned from this. You would think that they would have learned from this type of stuff happening in 99 and into 2000 and 2008, 7, 8. You would have thought that they would have learned. But the problem is people forget very easily. You really think that you remember things, but you don't. If I asked you right now, tell me what you had for lunch 3 days ago, and you didn't look at a calendar and you weren't the type that had the same thing for lunch every day, 9 out of 10 times you would not be able to tell me because we don't remember things like that. We just move on. Well, this happened again. We're now in a situation where the economy's tanking, things are bad. And don't get me wrong, it's bad policies for politicians too, but people also, don't really make good decisions with their money because they're not educated on what to do with their money. They're not educated on, how to really properly manage money because most people don't really even know how money works, and what money really is. They just think it's, dollars in their pocket. I have $10, I can buy $10 worth of items. There's more than that. There's more to that. It's sad to see because we're headed down this road again, and it looks like they're going to talk about what's, a crash that's imminent, that's coming. And I don't know if it is or if it's not, because we really don't know what the future holds, and it's hard to tell. And we have an election coming up. You really don't know if somebody gets into office, they could turn things around. Who knows? But it's not looking good at this point. So anyway, let's continue and see what they have to say.
$1,000 a month. You can't do it. Boom. Foreclosure, foreclosure, foreclosure. So that's not the case study of today. The case study of today is somehow, some way, the government thought it's a good idea to lower interest rates to 1%. And we had 3% loans that were going up.
Hmm.
And then we talk about 128-month expansion. By the way, if there's no COVID, that would have been a 150-month expansion that we would have
Hmm.
had. That's not good to have a 150-month expansion because during that cycle that we went on, Tom, money was so cheap that people were just picking up money and buying stuff left and right. It was so cheap. Go get a house, go get a car. Rates were low. These big companies are getting $50 million lines, $100 million lines, $200 million lines. Go get as much money as you can. Then COVID hits. When COVID hits, philosophically, it was a shit show. Go work from home, 18 months. That's what you got to do. Essential, non-essential. And then when that took place, companies like Twitter and many others said, at Twitter under Jack Dorsey, you can work from home for the rest of your life. What a noble company. That's what we got to do. And then so we go through that cycle. And then people started abusing employers, and they had two jobs that they weren't telling anybody, but they're making 82 here and 88 here. So they're making $170,000 thinking they can do this fraud that they're doing for the rest of their lives. And then they're living a $170,000 a year lifestyle, not realizing that's not going to be around forever. And then the money that they put into the system, all of a sudden people have cash in the bank like never before. So we had $2.2 trillion of cash, Americans. Every quarter, that thing went from 2.2 trillion to 1.7 trillion to 1.4 trillion to 1.1 trillion. And our savings as a nation kept going lower and lower and lower and lower. So then we have more money being printed into the economy. And then we had the election.
Yeah, so just something to make a point on that. The savings thing is so true. I think right now they did somebody did a poll or something where they figured out from a large group of people, the average American, it might even be from, bank deposits, but they're not allowed to reveal the actual information. They just do, they gather the generalization for, research purposes. But the average American, I think right now, cannot get their hands on more than $600 cash for an emergency event. So something that happens in their life, they don't have more than $600 in their savings. That's not good. That's really bad. And they tell you we have 6 months worth of reserves in your savings for a rainy day or whatever. If something happens, your water heater breaks or whatever, you need that. But after seeing what happened with COVID, and that whole situation took way more than 6 months, at this point now, it's probably a lot better to have a year's worth. But think about how hard it is to get there, to save that much money, a year's worth, to replace all of your expenses for a year. That's really what that means, having a year's worth of cash reserves in case something happens, right? Think about how many people were defaulting on all kinds of bills and loans and stuff during the COVID era because they just could not pay the money because their job wouldn't let them go to work, or the government wouldn't let them go to work, and wouldn't let their job open. So they literally just could not make a living even if they tried. But I disagree with Patrick in the regard that there were people during that time. Yeah, some people were gaming the system for sure. People are, no matter what happens in life, there's always going to be people who try to figure out how to take advantage of the system in whatever it is that's going on. When a new policy comes out, the people line up to try to figure out how they can take advantage of that. And then, whatever the government or whatever company has to now go back. And now that they know about that fraud, they have to figure out how to write things in that, you know, make sure that it's known that that fraud is not allowed. And then they just come up with a new way to fraud. Like, people are always going to be people who try to commit fraud in every aspect of life, no matter what it is, because there are so many people that just try to cheat the system, get rich quick, go around, cut corners, whatever it is. There's always going to be people who try to game the system, right? Now, taking those people aside, during that time, you see that there are really crazy things going on in the world. Let's say you have like 4 kids and you're a job and you're making $75,000 a year. The schools are shut down. You can't get your kid in school, and your wife can't get back to work because they won't let her. But for some reason, you're able to work because your industry is considered, important, or whatever it was at the time, whatever lingo they made up. If you have an opportunity to take a second job that pays you just as much as your first job, so you're technically working 2 full-time jobs, and you're doing it remotely, yeah, you're not dedicating 100% of your attention to the primary job that's paying you. Maybe you shouldn't do that. But if you take out a second job and you're doing full-time hours back to back, like double shifts, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with you saying, I'm going to make 2 incomes from 2 different jobs, but do it remotely from home so that I can, be here for my family as well. And I'm going to let my wife, you know, give the freedom for her to not work and instead take care of our children because they can't go back to school. So somebody has to watch them and raise them and teach them and educate them. So now we're homeschooling, and all this stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. And when life throws you things, you got to find a way to adapt around that. So I think there were probably a lot of people during that time that just they had to do what they had to do to make ends meet and weather the storm because they didn't know what tomorrow was going to bring. And this was all new to everybody in the whole world. We've never gone through this before. We shut down the whole world and just say, we're going to turn off all the machines, everything's going to stop. That was so, unexpected. No one really knew for sure that that's what was, going to happen or that that was going to actually be what it was and last as long as it did. But I understand what he's saying. He's talking more about people gaming the system where, you're working two jobs at the same time during the same hours and you're getting paid two salaries, but each job doesn't know about it. That's not really fair. You can't like work 9 to 5 twice in the same time period in one day, but you can work 9 to 5 and then work your other job from 6 to 10 or whatever it is. And there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, it's interesting conversation so far. Let's see where it goes.
Then now COVID is gone. Now we got to get people to come back to work. They don't want to come back to work. They want to work from home. Then companies like David Solomon, Goldman Sachs, they start saying, no, you got to be there for accountability on Monday morning and all this other stuff. If you don't, you're not getting your bonus. People started kind of getting creative. That's unfair. That's not cool. I'm going to go get another job. Many did. Then some companies came out and said, no, we're just not doing that. And then, that is taking place. And then you have a bit of war. You have craziness going on with another war. You have all of these things taking place. And then suddenly, Jerome Powell sees inflation's go to 8%. Wait a minute. What's going on here? We got to lower it to 2%. How do you lower it to 2%? Let's start increasing interest rates. This is crazy. We raised 4.88% in the shortest amount of time ever in the history of America. There's a chart on Statista. You got to see this. It's a great visual. And it shows historically when we've had to increase rates, it's over a 3-year span, or it's over a 6-year span, or a 3.5-year span. No. This is over a 12-month, 15-month span. 4.88%. Boom. Like this. Hoping inflation goes down. Okay. Inflation moves a little bit. Sales of homes to the lowest in 20 years. Mortgage applications, lowest in 27 years. People who were doing loans, I don't know if you have friends who were doing loans or mortgages or real estate. These are guys that were making $500,000 3 years ago per month. They're not making nothing right now. Guys who were making $100,000 a month are having a hard time making $8,000 a month right now in loans. There is no loan application because even new homes are not being sold to do the loans of new homes. So home sales are down because typically when refi comes down, people will sell homes. No one's selling homes today. Why are they not selling homes today? Because they're still sitting on some cash and they don't want to give up that 3% loan they got a year and a half ago. And then you look at the data. Okay, let's just say I do sell this house. I got to go buy another house, but I got to get that house at 8%. I'm not willing to do it. Why would I do it? So I'm not going to. There is no motive to sell the house. So now, what's the ticking time bomb? A few things. One, Jerome Powell is trying to increase rates, hoping unemployment increases because that's what we need. They need the unemployment to increase. It's not moving. It's still 3.7, 3.5, 3.8, 3.9. It's not moving. It's right there. Okay, so either we need unemployment to go up or we need people to run out of money. If people run out of money and they're stressed out, guess what they do? They're going to sell the house. So today, numbers came out saying it's 55% more cheaper to rent than buy. This is the highest we've had ever. It's 55% cheaper to rent than to buy today. This is not a
There you go.
buying season. This is a renting season. Okay. This is what Wall Street Journal, many of these other articles will talk about. Okay. Meanwhile, the economy is growing. The economy is going up. Dow Jones, it's killing it. Based on 7 companies, Magnificent Seven. And you know who these Magnificent Seven companies are? NVIDIA, you got these Facebooks, the Amazons, the Apples, these 7 companies that are preventing the company from the market from having a crash. Then while all this stuff is taking place, Powell now is dealing with a war. He's afraid. He wants to raise the rates a quarter, but due to the war that took place in Israel, he doesn't. And then data shows, which is by far the most interesting data to answer your question here, is how much after these 5 situations where we raise the rates multiple times in a span, this being the shortest in the most condensed time frame, how long does it typically save? Is there a formula of when recession comes, if at all? Here's what they realize. Recession usually comes on average 11 months after the last month they raise the rates. So what does this mean? If Powell's no longer going to raise the rates, and the last time they raised the rates was September, let's just say, that means recession is going to come when? Not October. So you got October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. August of next year, 3 months before election. That's if it follows the trends of the last 5 times when they raised interest rates. So, how did I start off the story? I talked about the doctor that has met 4,000 different patients, and the 420, you're kind of going through this. The problem of everything I just told you could be completely wrong because there's a fifth when the doctor says, I've never seen this before.
Right.
So we've never seen current climate before for us to be able to put it and say, well, according to this and according to that, we've never had this situation before.
Yeah, that's the thing that makes me really tense. But there are fundamentals that when I look at, I think, ooh, like it isn't possible to sustain this. So the thing that I just keep coming back to is debt and interest. And when you look at the charts that show the interest payments and how they're going to go up and up and up, and even people that locked in, say 3-year fixed rates at really low rates in the corporate market, that all goes away in a few years. And so you start looking at just the absolute behemoth numbers that are going to be due to service that money. And it becomes completely untenable. And the bad news is it becomes untenable both at the individual level, where we're more in debt than, I forget, ever or close to it. But individuals are in psychotic amounts of debt. Corporations are in ridiculous amounts of debt. And the nation is in a ridiculous amount of debt, all while we've had 2 major printing events since 2008. And so now you really have a very unstable market. So there's a great quote. It's called Minsky's financial institutional instability hypothesis, excuse me. And he said, when an economy is stable, people get optimistic. When people are optimistic, they go into debt. When they go into debt, the economy becomes unstable. And now that's even without the crazy rising in interest rates. So we have like this, for me, it seems self-evident that there is going like that gravity insists that things come back down, but they haven't yet. And so just when I want to get bullish and be like, hey, obviously this is all going to come crashing down, it just keeps not and not and not. My intuition is that a recession is inevitable. But
So that's one thing that I'll say. Jerome Powell probably did really well. I think that whenever you have somebody in government that he's the Fed chair, so it's kind of a gray area, but essentially he has the ability to like raise or lower interest rates, and that impacts the economy. As far as I know, I don't think Trump or Biden, either administration, really liked him, really cared for the way that he was handling the situation. So whenever you have that, that's pretty much a good thing because you don't want one side to favor you over the other. You want balance. You want somebody who's going to be balanced and do things that both sides like and do things that both sides don't like because that's fair, right? But the way that he handled it, he raised several times interest rates by like a quarter of a point, which was a really good way to slowly, gradually try and, you know, roll this out, roll this project out to keep the economy from crashing. And he did it in a calculated way over several quarters. I think total we're in it like 2 years or so now. Um, I think he did his last rate raise this year of 2024, and then there's talk that he may lower them now. He may start to lower them down and reverse course. And if he does it in a way where he lowers it a quarter point each, quarter, or if he does it in a way where he lowers everything, the interest rates a quarter point again, but reversed every quarter or every 2 quarters, whatever it is, maybe he can help bring the economy to an equilibrium over the course of 4 or 5 years total, where maybe we avoid a crash, maybe we don't get a crash. Now, there are a lot of people that saying no matter what, the economy is going to crash, and then there are people saying, "No, we're doing fine, we're going to get through this." No one really knows for sure. Sometimes people get lucky. Sometimes they have a calculation that they figured out, they crack the code, and they say it's going to crash. But even during 2008 housing crash, there were people who had foreseen that it was going to crash a long time before anybody else, and it again listed in that movie, The Big Short. And even they didn't know when. Many of them speculated certain dates, certain years, but were off, and it was taking longer and longer because there were unforeseen circumstances in the economy that prolonged it from happening. It was inevitable, but they prolonged it, and those people who guessed, who surmised that this was going to happen, had no control over that, and it took longer, and it just dragged on, and you really didn't know which way it was going to go until it finally did happen. Anybody who tells you for sure they know what's going to happen, no one has a crystal ball. No one knows what the future brings. You take calculated guesses. You take educated, calculated guesses as to where you think things are going to go based on research and your gut instinct. But you don't really know for sure. It's possible that if he winds this thing down the way that he wound it up, but he does it over the course of a long time, maybe 2 or 3 years, we may not go into a crash. Maybe things will equilibrium and then the economy will be fully picked up by then. Everything will be back to normal from COVID and all the shutting down of the economy and all the delays and everything that it caused, even businesses going out. New ones will have come in and already have, and now will be built up for a few years and stimulating the economy themselves. You really don't know which way it's going to go. So never say never, but I like what he did with the way that he rose the rates, and if he decreases them the same way, I think that it's possible that we could avoid a crash and roll into a whole new economy. Now, that being said, we're in a bubble. It's a big bubble and it's a bad bubble, and it's bigger than it was with the 2008 housing crash. So it's possible that we could also have a major crash as well. We could also have a crash that's so catastrophic that it's one of the worst in world history. And it could be one that rewrites the history books altogether. We have no idea. All that's clear is that the economy is not doing well, and things are worse than they ever have been before. And you could pretty much just feel it in the air. Something's coming, whatever it is, whether it's a crash, whether it's an economic boom, whether it's certain sectors booming, certain sectors crashing, things shifting, industries closing and going out completely, and new industries rising up. Look at what's going on with, for example, in the real estate world, office is pretty much decimated. It's not coming back the way it used to. A lot of office buildings are being repurposed into condos and apartment buildings and all kinds of other types of real estate, but office is not back. People are downsizing. Companies have downsized their offices to smaller buildings, smaller spaces to decrease their lease, payment each month. And offices still till this day have not returned, and it's been 4 years since COVID. That industry is dying, in my opinion. There's probably going to be offices forever, but they're going to look more like WeWork shared spaces, except a little different. They're going to be, maybe you rent it by the hour, you rent it by the day, the week, the month, or the year. There may be companies that say we need a 1 year lease in this office, and it could be, broken up in different ways. There could be different types of offices on each floor where the first floor people rent by the day, the second floor they rent by the week, the third floor they rent by the month, the fourth floor they rent by the quarter. Like, you don't know where office is going to go for sure, but it's not returning to what it used to be. The days of offices being what they used to be is over. So that industry is dying. On the flip side, you have the crypto industry, Web3. That's an industry that's come out of nowhere. It's rising. It's growing at a rapid rate. And there are so many people becoming crypto millionaires over the last 4 years, then like it's unheard of. There are people who are becoming crypto billionaires faster than people became millionaires during the tech boom in this country when computers were all the rage and the internet was all the rage, which was basically like Web 1 and 2. Well, you have new industries rising up and old ones coming down. If the rates slowly come down over the next few years and all that equilibrium balances out, maybe we don't have a crash, but you really don't know. You're just going to have to wait and see. But as time goes on, keep researching, keep learning, keep making calculated, educated guesses, and do smart things with your money. Do the best you can to make good decisions with your money to weather the economic storm that we're in now, but then set yourself up for positive growth in the future. But all right, let's finish this up.
But the market can remain crazy longer than you can remain solvent, whatever the quote is. Why hasn't it happened yet? And how do you think about, because obviously you have similar concerns of only the paranoid survive, but how do we turn paranoia into an action plan?
Yeah, so everything is right now about mapping out different possibilities. So, for example, if we're right now in a conference room and we got bored to write on, we would write on, you and I would write down and would say, okay, World War III takes place. What do you think of the chances of this taking place? Ray Dalio says 50%.
Yes, he
okay.
does.
Jamie Dimon says this is the most dangerous times we've had in America in decades. Okay, cool. So if World War III happens, what happens to the economy? Who's going to be the parties involved? Are we going to be involved purely through proxy, or is there going to be attack here? Then you write down the possibilities. Okay, if this happens, what are you going to do? If this happens, what are you going to do? Then next, what happens if unemployment all of a sudden goes to 7%, 6%? What happens if inflation goes down? What happens if Powell starts lowering rates back down to 5-4%? Holy shit, that's going to be crazy. What happened? So you got to write all of these different scenarios down. But here's a couple things that we have to be thinking about. And you said, which was fascinating. One, so credit card debt, highest it's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's the craziest thing about credit card being the highest it's ever been? Tom, the average interest rate card is the highest it's ever been.
Jesus.
Forget about the debt. So people are worried about the debt. So imagine the interest rates in the last 5 years has gone like this to 23%, or the average is 23% on credit card. You know what 23% means. That means the debt doubles about 2.5 years.
That's like loan shark.
That's loan shark. 3 years, your debt is doubling, right? But that's what we got right now on credit cards. Okay, so our debt is record breaking.
Yeah, so that's another super important point that he's making. And it actually goes hand in hand with home buying in this country at the same time. This is why I think a lot of people are, unfortunately, I'm praying that this is not the case, but it seems like it will be. A lot of people are probably going to end up getting stuck in their home for 15 to 20 years, even if they don't want to, because they just bought too high, or going into foreclosure and defaulting on their home that they bought during the COVID era, not before that. And here's why. Because during that time, home prices went up, but at the same time, the Fed was raising rates, right? So in real estate, you want a balanced situation. Either home prices are high and rates are low, or home prices are low and rates are high. You don't really want them to be at the same level because you need that counterbalance, right? When you buy a home and the home price is high and the interest rate is high, that's catastrophic. That is the worst market to buy a home in. You don't want to buy a home like that. If you buy a home where the home price is high, but the rate's really, really low, it makes sense because you're like, all right, well, at least the rate is low and the home will appreciate over time, but I'll still have a low rate, so my payments will be low and whatever. I'll be paying less money into the deal overall. If it's low and the interest rate's high, you're like, all right, well, it's not that big of a deal because the house is really cheap, so I'm getting this property for a very low price. I'm just paying a little bit more for that cost, right, of securing a very low price for something that will still potentially go up because all real estate pretty much appreciates no matter what. So the worst economy to buy in is your home price is high and your interest rate is high too. You don't want that. That's the worst way to buy. And that's what a lot of people did during this COVID era from 2020 to the present 2024. So unfortunately, a lot of people are going to get burnt on that. And it's going to take time, but it is eventually going to happen. And you're already seeing foreclosure rates increase in this country in almost every state, if not every state. It's the same situation like what he's talking about with the credit cards. You're having people rack up debt on credit cards, but interest rates are higher. So if you had a credit card for a long time, your interest rate is probably what it was, and it might not have changed. But if you have opened up a credit card recently, and a lot of people did during this time because they're not making ends meet, things are more expensive, they're struggling to put food on the table because groceries went up like 4 times what they originally were in like 2019. So let's say if you were able to buy, 50 items in 2019 for $100, you're paying 400 for $400 right now for the same 50 items. That's not good. If your average grocery bill a month is $500 in 2019, you're paying 2,000 now. That's a lot of money for the average American, especially that makes $55,000 a year. That's the average salary in this country. That's a lot of money. So if you can't afford to put food on the table, what are you going to do? A lot of people, they try to get a second job, and maybe they do. And some people just open up a credit card because they, want access to the money now until they can figure out a plan B. Well, what happens is, and what he's saying is the interest rates on that are so high when you rack up the debt, let's say you max out the card, in 3 years, because the interest rate is, let's say it's 33%, right? 33.33. 3 times that is 99.99, right? So if your interest is 33.33% per year, and 3 years goes by, you just increased your credit debt by 100%, which means you doubled it. You doubled your credit card debt by 100% within 3 years. If you max it out and just pay the minimum payment every month, you pretty much doubled your debt, right? Because the interest rate's so high, it only takes 3 years to get to 100% interest. So you're getting there, by not paying down the debt. And as 3 years go by, it's doubled. And now you think, you know, whatever, like just how do you get out of that? How do you get out of that if you're doubling at that rate? Well, the same thing is happening with our country, with our national debt. The interest payments are so high as the years go by and the debt keeps accumulating. The interest, so for example, like the GDP, the gross domestic product, we're bringing in. That's the money we're making. That's our income as a country. And then you have the debt, the money that we pay out, which we owe to whoever, other countries or whatever. If the GDP is whatever it is, you're making this much every year, and the debt is this much, but the interest on the debt is 30%. Let's say they're here, they're neck and neck. The debt is here, the GDP is here, the income's here, income expenses here. With a 30% increase in the debt every year, it goes like this: 2 years, 3 years. Now it gets harder to keep up with the debt because the interest is making the debt increase at such a rapid rate. Unless you're increasing the GDP at the same rate, it's almost impossible to pay that debt down. Now, over time, that bankrupts countries. That's how countries collapse. This happened with many countries in the world and throughout history where things just got so out of hand, they bankrupted themselves because they over leveraged themselves. This is why you really have to live in your means, within your means. But even a country does. A country has to live within its means too. And America thinks, we're the greatest. In many ways we are. But there are also many ways where we're stupid and foolish because we're not learning from the mistakes of others that made in the past. They were bigger empires than us. Or maybe not as big as the country, the landmass that we are, because we're like the fourth or fifth biggest country in the world, landmass wise. But, there are empires that were bigger than us in terms of how much control they had over the world and over all the other nations at their time, right? America is America, but there were empires that basically ruled all the world at the time that they were in existence, or most, if not all. So we're foolish because we're not realizing we're making the same mistakes that previous empires made, and we're also thinking like them. We'll never fail. We're the biggest. Where's ancient Rome today? Why do we call it ancient Rome? Why do we call it ancient Greece? Why do we call it Great Britain when now it's England and Europe and whatever, the European Union, whatever. It used to be Great Britain. They were the greatest country and superpower in the world at that time. They're who America freed themselves from and fought against to get that freedom, to become the next Great Britain. So we're making a huge mistake with all this stuff, and we're being foolish about it, thinking that it cannot catch up to us because we're the greatest and we'll just keep printing money or whatever. Eventually, you will print yourself out of business. It's just not possible. You can't keep printing money because that devalues everything. And if everything gets devalued, then nothing has a price. Nothing is worth anything, and everything collapses. And vice versa. Things that are assets get more and more expensive and overinflate to the point where they're unaffordable and unattainable by anyone. So if there's no buyer, then the seller has a worthless item. It's no longer an asset because there's no one that can buy it, right? It's not good. We have to correct course because if not, over the next 5, 10, 15 years, we may not have a country anymore. And we may end up looking like a third world country. Let's finish this up.
The forgiveness for your loan, school loan,
loans.
is gone. So now you have to start paying for it. That's $300-400 a month that people are expecting, I think, October, November starting. Then set that part aside, go to the corporations you were talking about that are borrowing money. This year, their interest payment on corporation that borrowed money is going to end up being around $530 billion, just interest.
Oh my God.
Next year, it's going to 730. Next year, it's going to 1.1 trillion.
Yes.
In the next 5 years, it's going between 1.3 to 1.5 trillion dollars just on the corporate debt
That's bad.
that we're talking about. By the way, next part, car payment, A credit, no one's affected. Good credit. They're making the credit payments on time. Mortgages, we're not saying anything crazy with people with bad credit not making payments. We're still good. Car payments and subprime, they're seeing a spike in defaults where people are not making car payments. The first sign you're seeing on what's taking place. No problem. Let's go to the next one. That's the scariest one. U.S. has 33 trillion that's ever been, the highest it's ever been. No problem. What does that really mean? Nobody can really figure it out. Here's what it means. Of the money that we have, about 8 trillion of it, the rates are going to recalibrate, and we're going to have new rates that we're going. Every single time the rates go up just 1 point for the U.S. government, our interest payments, Tom, increases by $300. So imagine we raise rates by 3 points, just interest. It's $1 trillion more.
Yeah.
If it's 6%, $2 trillion more per year. That's that. The last thing that I'll just kind of get you to be thinking about. So anytime you want to know if the economy is back to normal, go to Vegas. If Vegas is humming, like, okay, we're good. And always, whenever you go to Vegas, talk to cab drivers and talk to the drivers who are doing Uber. Always ask, how's conventions doing? How are you seeing with traffic? Are you noticing things canceling? No, this has been crazy for us the last 3 months. Everything's good. But if they start seeing a downturn, they're typically an indicator of what's to come. Transportation industry, we consult for a lot of transportation companies at Bedebe Consulting. One of my friends, I'm about to go meet with them right after this. Their construction company does very well. We have these 3 clients that we have who are doing transportation. 2 of them are doing 100 million, 80 million a year. Numbers are down 40, 50%. One of them is doing $1 billion a year. Their revenue is down 70%.
Oh.
So let's actually talk about transportation. Why would transportation be down 70%? Aren't Walmart, Amazon companies ordering stuff to ship it from here to there? Why would that be lowering? What do they know that we don't know? Again, these are people who have data to insider stuff that we can sit there and say, these are great indicators when you're studying these things on what's going on. Does this mean recession is going to come here? Like I told you earlier when we were talking, my bigger fear is a reverse market crash, which Venezuela just threw, which all of a sudden the rates get lowered and Dow and S&P goes. And Dow goes from 33, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, just goes boom.
Is that just the dollar losing its purchasing power?
Yes, exactly. That's what happens. The more we're printing, like, for example, a Michael Jordan card years ago, a BGS 9.5, sold for $78,000. Oh my God, that's crazy. But then all of a sudden, all of these boxes kept entering the marketplace of 1986 Fleer. The guys started buying these things and they were sending more to get graded at Beckett and PSA. The more they got cards graded, that $78,000 card, BGS 9.5, became a $60,000 card, $50,000 card, $40,000 card, $30,000 card. You can probably buy BGS 9.5 today for $20,000, $25,000. Okay. So the inventory increases the more we print money. The more you print dollars and it's more accessible, the less it's valued, the less it's worth. So these are some things that's going on today. You sit there and you're like, okay, so does this mean guys are not going to make a lot of money? No. You're going to see the first trillionaire in the next 24 months because none of this is going to phase at the top. None of it. This printing money, every time they print money, the guys at the top make more money. If there's anybody that should be against printing money, it's loans. If there's anybody that should be against printing money, it's them. If there's anybody that's for printing money, guess who it is? The guys at the top. Why? Because the poor and middle America can't keep money. They spend it. And when they spend it, what do they buy? A product owned by somebody in the S&P 500 or other people who have businesses. Money flows up. They can keep printing money all they want. So when low and middle income families are like, look at these guys, all they care about is themselves. Let that bill pass for $2.7. You really look at them and you say, you have no clue how money works.
Yep.
You have no idea how money works. Now, guess what? Let's print $10 trillion. Rich are okay with it. You ain't going to get the rich complaining about printing $10 trillion or $5 trillion. BlackRock's going to be like, all right, cool. We're at $8 to $10 trillion of money in our ETFs, and we're buying up a bunch of different companies. We're buying up all these properties today. Right now, it's going to be nothing. But next few years, you have to go through us, and we dictate the market, and we're going to own it all. And what are you going to do about it? You know, these are a lot of different moving parts that is going on to me. And again, for me, the idea of middle America not being able to make the money they need to make to be able to afford a house, send their kids to school, live in a nice place, enjoy some dreams, maybe not the biggest ones, but some of their dreams are going to become a reality. Middle America is getting smaller and smaller and smaller every single time we print money.
If you like that clip, check out the full powerful episode here, and I'll see you there.
Yeah, so just to wrap up, 100%. I mean, pretty much everything he's saying is spot on. It's sad. It really is sad because most people don't take their money and do smart things with it. They just live for today, live in the moment, don't plan ahead because they just figure, if I die tomorrow, whatever, I wouldn't have enjoyed my life. And a lot of people are fixated on fun. They're very caught up in fun. Everything is about having fun and enjoying things now. You gotta practice delayed gratification, where you sacrifice your fun now, and instead earn it on the back end. Spend your 20s, if you're young, spend your 20s having a lot less fun than what most people do with their 20s. Take that time, learn skills that are going to help you make money in life, and skills that are also beneficial to help you save money. Like if you can learn how to build your own house, that's going to save you a huge expense in life that you'll probably carry with you for a long time because it'll take a long time to pay that debt down. But if you can do a lot of work on your own house, you're going to save money there. If you can learn how to grow your own food, you'll save money there because you'll not spend 4 times on groceries like people are doing now, right? Even if you're only growing a few items, if it's items that you eat constantly, you can save that money there and reinvest it in other things to continue to grow and build your life and your financial stability. There's so many things that people can do with their money, even if it's a very small amount. If you took like $20 a month and invested it in, an index fund, a mutual fund, you bought stock, you bought crypto, whatever it is, and you did that every month, by the end of a year, you'd have $240 invested in that asset. But the asset could have gone up. Let's say it went up every month for 12 months by like, not hypothetically, but 10%, right? At the end of 10 months, it's over 100%. So you doubled your money, right? That's not reality. Most things don't make 10%. But if you just did that, it's such a small amount of money. Think about how much you spend on Netflix every month, right? What is it? Somewhere between $15 to $20 a month for people to mindlessly watch TV. If you took that money and invested it in something, over time, you might build up a nest egg where if you did hit economic hard times like we're in now, you wouldn't have to rack up credit card debt. You could draw from that money to put food on the table until you weathered the storm. And then when you came out of the storm, you wouldn't be in debt. Or, whatever else, just invest in your future, your children's future, just so many things. But a lot of people in this country are making a lot of big mistakes with money because they don't know how money works because the schools do not teach money. They don't teach finance. They don't teach us anything from K through 12 about any of that stuff other than basic mathematics, which applies in money naturally. But they don't teach us about money itself, how it works, and the proper vehicles on the market for people to invest in. Unless you get to college and take a business course, you're never really gonna know about that stuff if you don't learn it on your own. So, final word of advice is take your time, sharpen your skills in your 20s, save your money, but also invest your money. Don't just save your money because the dollar is being devalued. You're not going to be able to save your way to be rich. Those days are over. You'll never be able to save enough money to where you have a nice nest egg because that's just the way it is. It's depreciating in value. And as time goes on, every year that you hold those dollars, they're going to be worth less. Your buying power is less. Invest your money and then do other things with your life. Whether it's you want to enjoy life, great, enjoy life, but earn it. Save up for a trip. Don't just put it on a credit card. If you can't afford to go on a nice trip, do things that are free or cost effective. But just be smarter with your money than the generations before you because you can see what they've done to the economy and you now have to live with that. I do as well. But we have to live with those repercussions and now dig our way out of that hole. And it's not going to be easy, if even possible. So your chances now to really do the right things with your money and with your time and energy while you're young, especially. But all right, that was a great video. If you want to catch the full video, you can check it out on Tommy's channel, Impact Theory. I think it's like over an hour long, but we went pretty long here today. So, check that out if you want. And stay tuned for more content, more videos that I'm going to be putting out. And that's it for today's video. All right, so just wanted to take this time to remind you to check out my children's book, Little Boy Full of Love. This is a little sneak peek on the inside. Let's see. It's a great children's book. I wrote this for my son. and it's actually available on a lot of different platforms: Amazon, Walmart.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Indigo, Bookshop.org, and a bunch of other, online platforms, e-commerce sites where you can purchase it today. I think more importantly, it's actually available in a lot of physical bookstores throughout the country. I know most people probably don't even realize that there are still bookstores left, but there's actually a lot of them. And the book is in many states right now. I think we're in 15 or 16 different states across the country, which is pretty good for the first run. And we definitely highly recommend that you check out the book and purchase it from the bookstores because we love to support our local businesses. That's the backbone of the American economy, and it needs to remain that way. Otherwise, all the big corporations will just own everything, and we'll just all work for them, and there'll be no more competing or competition in America. So, it's a dying industry, but there are still many bookstores. Support them by buying the book from them. If you go on my Instagram page, you'll see which local bookstores are near you that are currently carrying the book. And it's in, like I said, many different states. So you'll see which states. But if you don't want to buy it from a bookstore or there's not one near you that's carrying it, check it out on Amazon. We have it on our storefront. You can find that information also, link in my bio and in the show notes. But check out the Amazon store as well. Besides my book, there's a lot of great products on there that we personally use in our daily lives that we highly recommend. Depending on what you need, they're all categorized. You can check out different categories and shop by category. But check out the store. There's a lot of great items on there that we recommend, like I said, that we use in our daily lives. And also check out our apparel as well. All that stuff is in the show notes, links in my bio, Instagram, Rumble, YouTube, all that stuff. And don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, share, all that stuff everybody always says, but it really does help keep the channel going and give me the ability to continue to put more content out there. We're going to talk about a lot of different things on this platform. We're going to talk about everything from breaking news, politics, faith, religion, whatever. But we're going to talk about business too. We're going to talk about finance. We're going to talk about health. We're going to talk about wellness. We're going to talk about a whole array of different topics that I find interesting and that I'm knowledgeable on. And then eventually we're going to talk with people and do interviews. So if you want to support the channel, follow us, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And that's it. Stay tuned for the next one.